Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of CookieCast. Today on CookieCast, it's the football podcast, but it is the last football podcast for a little while. It's the last one of the season, technically. It's the last one of season 4 of the football podcast. Can you believe it? Season 4. 45 episodes in this season. Booming. It's just going to be a short break, though. We're going to be back in a few weeks, so I don't know what I'm sad about. Anyway, before we get into the football, please do take a minute to like, share, subscribe and comment. And if you do have more than a minute, you could consider leaving us a review. Right, that's that done. Let's get going. So here we go. This is CookieCast, the football podcast.
Recording in progress.
Paul. She is once again correct, ladies and gentlemen, and for the final time, technically, of the 2021-2022 season, welcome along to your football podcast, where we'll strive to give you some ins and outs, ups and downs, roundabouts, and all-round terrible performances of the football world over the last 7 days or so. So, what better place to start then? Then we'll dive into the England fixtures from last week. One of which I believe might get a bit more talking than the other, but we'll see. The book is in shot.
I mean, you know, I can dilly-dally as much as you gentlemen would like, or we can get to the fact that England versus Italy was a 0-0 draw. Firstly, did anybody watch it?
Yes, parts of it.
I think
But
Bob's.
when people were saying it was an exact, it was a repeat of the fixture from the end of the Euros. I mean, we could have done with it been a little higher scoring than the first effort as well, but no, apparently not. It's to be a carbon copy, and it just, I don't genuinely remember that much of it, apart from thinking, thank God that's over, to be fair. I mean, it was a very similar feeling, but we'll get to that about the next game. This was the one of the two fixtures we had last week, though, where it was officially behind closed doors, wasn't it? That had the children in attendance, which I still think was a great way of getting the kids into it, and then they go and spoil it by sticking them a 0-0.
I haven't got out. I haven't got much to say about this one. I saw bits and bobs of it. I can't really remember that much.
I'm just trying to say, like I said, I didn't see any of it as I was out for the evening, but I'm trying to base some of my sort of stuff on the team that I can see, and I mean, it doesn't look as if, like, on paper, you'd imagine if that was the team that was picked for the first game of the World Cup, you'd probably have a few questions. But for the majority of the players, you'd say, yeah, they're probably there or thereabouts. I mean, Ramsdale, probably the first choice keeper, depending on how Pickford does for the first 6 months of the season. You could argue the back four's not really that sort of nailed on any of them, really. But then you've got Declan Rice in midfield. Ward-Prowse could have a shot at getting a game. Sterling, Mount and Grealish is the three in behind the striker. Obviously the striker's not going to be Tammy Abraham, it's going to be Harry Kane. But it's a team that's competitive, and especially for Abraham. Well, for Abraham and Tomori, they've spent all season playing against Italian players, so should know how they work and stuff like that. So should have either known how to stop him scoring in Tomori's case, which obviously he did. But Abraham, you'd maybe have sort of thought he would potentially have a better chance of scoring based on the fact that he's played against some of their defenders at least a couple of times this season. So, yeah, a bit flat, really. Bit of a nothing game. As it turned out.
Just uninspiring is the word I would probably use.
Looks like we'll have to skip on then. We'll have to do the dissection of the next debacle.
Touching on the Tammy Abraham thing though, like he scored a lot of goals in Serie A this year. So how can a player, and I know it's not an exact science because there's a lot of strikers who haven't scored a lot of goals scored a lot of goals in the league and not scored a lot of goals for England over the years. But how, generally, if a player's done well for a season, they can come into England and get, score some goals or get some chances. And there didn't seem to be many chances from what I saw. So there's some, I don't want to be like this overreactionary kind of thing, but there's obviously something wrong at the moment. But yeah,
we'll get into that because I wanna ask you fellas some questions after this next one.
So something that is worth it's something, isn't it? From this game, there are actually points. Yes, Stu, your confusion is valid. A 0-0. And plenty of goal scorers predicted for both sides. However, both Stuart Woodmansey and Matthew Moore predicted draws, which nets them both a point. Points on the board. Beautiful stuff. And that's where we'll leave that. So we're going to move swiftly on to another England. Oh, wait. Yeah, it's going to be England. England versus Hungary. Now, even I know that England have played Hungary previously and didn't have great time of it. I believe myself and Stu were on the same page. We're like, they're going to have had a talking to. They're going to have been told what's what. They're going to come out stronger than last time and they're going to put points on the board, especially for us. Heavily predicted England to win by the podcast crew. Even this guy was like, they're in the room, I'll give them a goal kind of deal. So, for those of us who don't know, who's going to do the duty of talking about this one?
I'll give the score and then we'll dive into the dissection, as it were. So yes, this was the fourth round of the Nations League fixtures and the reverse of the previous Saturday's game. It was England versus Hungary. It ended with England not scoring again. However, Hungary managed to score 4 goals, which is a little bit ridiculous. There are some stats around this that we'll come to a bit later on. I'll keep those in the tank for after we've done the dissection or when we're sort of getting into the nuts and bolts and the meat of the matter. But the goals were scored by Sholai, I think his name was. He got 2. Roland Sholai, 2. Yeah, there was a goal for Jolt Nodge, although his name looks like it should be Nagy, but apparently he's Nodge. And then the final goal scored in the 89th minute by Daniel Gazdag to complete the route and send home the 30 or so thousand at Molineux thoroughly miserable.
Not gonna lie, I'm really glad you did the goal scorers because of the 3, I was good with Gazdag. The other 2, that's not how I would have said either of those names. So thank you, Mr. Williams, for taking that bullet.
No worries.
Saying about the crowd being miserable, did we all see even the first game back in front of fans at Molineux, and they all traipsed out, didn't they? A lot of them will have missed that last goal because there was a lot of people leaving.
Yeah, there were the stands did look thoroughly threadbare at the 85th minute or so. So,
the whole thing was just embarrassing. Like, I decided to punish myself twice by thinking I'll not go for a run until the football's on, and I'll watch the first half whilst I'm on the treadmill. And to which must have been amazing for my neighbours that were maybe walking down the street at the time, so there's just noises coming from our garage that resemble, what the fuck are you doing? Amazing. Yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to watch football whilst being on a treadmill ever again.
Well, all I could think was, you really are a glutton for punishment, aren't you? Get on the treadmill and watch England play football.
Man. Well, lesson learned. That's it for me now. Not anymore. But I mean, I was texting you guys afterwards, wasn't I? And genuinely, the overlying description of how England approached that game for me was just ground netball. That, like, for whatever reason, between the Italy game and the Hungary game, every single thing they did, especially in the first half, it was like they couldn't take more than one touch. It was just, everything was just a tap, tap, tap. It was just, pass was going straight back. And then Hungary were pressing. So, of course, they were there just to take the ball every single time. And it was just not good. And there was no other plan to it. They just kept hammering at it. And nothing happened. Nothing happened. Until, obviously, then in the 16th minute, Soloy, as he was, got through and smashed it in. But I think at that point, Hungary had had two touches in England's box, which was the initial touch to tee it up and then the second touch to volley it in. Everything else had just been in the middle of the park. It was just terrible, like, all round. It was one of them, they were cancelling each other out, neither team particularly going anywhere. And after me and you, Andy, being convinced that they were going to come out all guns blazing, couldn't have been any more wrong. But then still had that stupid thing of, well, it's, they're down at half time, surely they're going to do it now. Not a right lot changed second half.
Like, I watched the first half, and then I was like, I'm going to the shop. Went into the shop, and then it's like, well, this performance is just going from bad to worse. I was like, I couldn't have really got much worse than what I left in the house at like half time. And it's now 3-0, and then John Stones promptly got sent off. I got back to the house, and I missed the fourth goal because I was like, I can't be bothered with that. Well, to be honest, the reason which made me 100% not turn the telly back on was when they're like, they're going to bring Harry Maguire on. I'm like, because we're 3-0 down to 10 men. Yeah, you don't want to concede any more goals, do you? So let's make sure we bring a defender on to really shore it up at the back, because we're really in this game right now. We've got to keep it safe at the back, because a 3-0 win, a 3-0 loss. Yeah, we want to keep it at that place. It's just bizarre. I don't know what's happened. I know, some of the stuff I've seen from Southgate saying we've got to get used to keeping the ball, because when we're in Qatar, we can't just run around and play Premier League football all the time. And I understand that, but I think when I was listening to the radio, they were like, this isn't the team that'll start in Qatar. I'm like, well, I bloody well hope not. But also, can anybody inform me who is going to be playing instead? Because of that team that was there that played last night, there was only, from my kind of thing, there's only 2, maybe 3 changes that I could see coming in, and they weren't players that are going to make a massive amount of difference. You're telling me Luke Shaw's going to make a difference to that team? No. Is Declan Rice might make a bit of a change to that team? All right, but
I think. No, sorry, you can't.
I just couldn't see any kind of maybe it's doom and gloom, and it's typical kind of English reaction to a poor set of results, and God, Bobby Robson before the '90 World Cup was, people calling for his head and stuff like that, which is fine, but I've never seen such a pointless set of 4 games and had to see no direction to the team. And it's this kind of, the quote from Kane today saying, "Oh, people are forgetting what we did 6 months ago." Yeah, mate, because you do not look like anything like that team.
It is strange that to see how far the team's I suppose fallen's a bit of an over exaggeration, but dipped. If you look at where they were 12 months ago, obviously they were in the final of the European Championship.
This forms part of what I want to ask you guys about, but I feel like we might need to take a little bit of a break.
So, I am a man that hates to disrupt the flow, but I feel that there's probably a lot of meat on the bone here, so it's a great place to take a small break. I know we've only just really started, but we'll take a small break, and we'll get stuck in a minute.
Recording in progress.
So, let's start back up again then. So, I think the main thing for me that I highlighted was that he can't go into the tournament with a blasé attitude of, we don't need to pick a left back. We've got players that can play. We've got right backs that can play on the left. So, I know that the Italy game he had Kieran Trippier playing out at left back, which he has played there before. I think he played there in the semi-final against Croatia. Or maybe it was, I can't. He's definitely played in big games for England there before. But it just highlighted that the amount of times that Reece James was playing on the left of the 4 last night, and the amount of times that he would get the ball and then just have to sort of check his run to come back onto his right to then deliver the ball into the box or pick a pass out with his right foot as well. It just completely shut down that avenue on that side of the pitch for any sort of attacking build-up. And I know they tried to fix that in the second half by pushing it to more of a back 5 with him as a right wing-back and Saka as a left wing-back. But, yeah, I think it just highlighted to me that he needs to basically pick specific players for their position rather than just relying on utility players who can fill a space.
So my thing sort of was going to be that ever since that game finished, the second the game finished, they started rolling out all the stuff about the Hungary game was the biggest home defeat in 94 years, and it's terrible, and they're now facing the prospect of relegation from the top tier of the Nations League. Firstly, we've the Nations League, to me, still not really a thing yet. Not really there. It's not an established tournament. I'm not really that arsed. And if they do get relegated from this magical top tier that's clearly full of the world's best teams like Hungary, then surely they'll win a few more games in theory, you'd have thought, next time around. So whatever. But all this stuff of late, when England sort of the prospects have been high and they've done well in the Euros and all the stuff before it, they've had a pretty settled team. It's been the same players in and out. So really, when it came to these 4 games, and it was widely publicised beforehand that these were going to be the games where he would be bringing in players for debuts and testing them out and stuff, and seeing people like Jared Bowen and Reece James and Sunday League competition winner Conor Gallagher, is it really that much of a surprise that it didn't work? Because they're not used to playing together as a team. They've had 2 weeks worth of training sessions, whereas the team that went into the Euros and the games before that have been playing together an awful lot longer. What do you guys think?
I get your point from a basics point of view, for me, I think it's more of a case of the squad as a whole probably hasn't changed that much. So obviously the squad, obviously we don't see how the squad trains and things like that. We don't see the exact sort of games that they play and things like that. But you would imagine that at some point they'll have maybe a couple of extra players on standby that'll just go with the squad to train but won't be officially involved in the games. And it'll be a case of they'll do like the first 11 versus the second choice. Well, I say the second choice, like the players that are involved in the starting lineup. Let's call it that. And then you'll maybe tweak a couple, and you'll take a couple out of the first 11 and put them in with the sort of the unused subs and such, so that they know that if they're going to be playing in that system, that they're drilled in that position. They know exactly where they're going to play. So it shouldn't come as that much of a surprise when it comes to actually playing competitive games. Really.
And that's what I mean though. That's fine, but this is the first time that some of those players have been involved in that. So this is still kind of new, and they didn't have the luxury of being the players that were sat on the sidelines whilst the first teamers, if you like, took care of it. They were there. They like somebody like I'm going to keep picking on him obviously because I've seen him play the most out of all of them. But somebody like Jared Bowen, in them 4 games for England, I would say the positive that we take from that is that he got his England debut, because he didn't really get much chance to do anything else, because the way that team was set up, if you saw him play for West Ham during the season and seen them 4 England games this past week or so, you wouldn't even think it was the same guy, because that team, he was put out there. I think, oh great, bit of width in the England team. How many times did they pass it to him? The entire 4 games, you can count on like one hand still. And and then because he wasn't getting used, a couple of times that the ball did get played over the top to him down the wing, he had a bit of a hard time with it. I thought like they weren't. It's weird that, like, I guess it kind of goes back to what you were just saying a minute ago about picking the players for the positions, but also then for the system. Because yes, great, he got, he give the width, but they weren't playing that kind of setup, so it was a bit pointless in being there.
I think Southgate sometimes gets himself into like the populist kind of picks, and there was a clamour for Gallagher to be in the squad. There was a clamour for Bowen to be in the squad. There was a clamour for like 3 or 4 people that are in the squad this time that I'm not saying didn't deserve to be in there, but sometimes it's kind of like, well, I'm going to pick them for picking them's sake. And it sounds awful, but there's every potential that Bowen and Gallagher could be, obviously not one-cap wonders, but they could be single-figure caps, because this might be their chance. And everyone will go, well, they were shit. But they were shit in a shit England side. And I'm not saying that they were. It's not my opinion of what they were. I just think it's going to be this kind of like negative mark against them, because they were involved in this shambles, basically. That, I know they've got to get these games in, because no doubt UEFA have got TV partners to answer to, so then they've got to tart up the friendly matches that players don't turn up to. And the thing is, I think I heard somewhere or read somewhere, oh, well, it's just a friendly with a fancy name, someone had said. And you're like, yeah, but we'd be kicking off if it was a 4-0 loss to Hungary in a friendly match, because it's happened in the past where a friendly match has been a 1-0 loss to somebody not obscure, but like somebody who's not in the top 10. And for whatever reason, England fans, because we've won so many things since in the past 50 years, think that we deserve to be beaten like everybody, no matter what. And I don't know. It just seems the whole thing seems to have been a completely pointless exercise.
This was the other two, that it was like a 2-part thing that I was going to ask you guys as well and see what you think too. So you said there about the it being a tarted up friendly. my interpretation of the fact that they set up this whole Nations League thing in the first place was because they didn't want the pointless friendly to be a thing anymore. So that to encourage the countries effectively to still be bringing their best teams to the game. Firstly, was that ever really going to happen, especially with such a packed fixture list for the top players, particularly this season where they've it's well documented about the Liverpool players having 63 games and all that nonsense, all of which, the referees weren't on their side because they're not Man City, Jurgen Klopp. But, has the Nations League then actually had the effect that they wanted in that regard?
I think it becomes a backup thing for teams. So, like the year that England got to the final, we got to the final of the first one, didn't we? And because England fans were so starved of any kind of success, it was like, ooh, we've got to the final of the Nations League thing, and you're like, no one gives a shit. It's like winning the Intertoto Cup, And whereas like this time, obviously Italy haven't qualified for the World Cup, and they've put a bit more emphasis on it. Obviously, they're in a bit of a kind of flux because they haven't qualified for the World Cup. A lot of their players are older, and they're trying to blood young players, which is kind of the theory of what England were doing. But we're also in the process of going to the World Cup in 6 months' time. I don't know. The unfortunate thing is the emphasis that fans put on it, and not myself, but other fans are going to put on it, is going to be different to what the managers and the players put onto it. Because it's never going to be a World Cup or European Championship. But unless you haven't qualified for either, and you've kind of got to get yourself out of the kind of big, deep, shitty hole that you've dug yourself into. But it's lovely because England will have some lovely trips to Malta and Andorra and wherever else they're going to think, and they'll love it because they'll win. The England fans will love it because it'll be 5, 6, 7-0 for every single match of the Nations League. And
so what you're saying is turn back into a qualifying campaign again. Yeah.
I mean, it won't be quite that drastic. The drop off won't be that bad. So obviously there's 4 different subsections of the Nations League. So you've got A through D with your groups. I think there's 4 groups there's certainly 4 groups in Group A. And I was explaining this to a guy at work today. So the way I think there is some validity to it, because the whole point of it was that rather than like the minnows, like San Marino, Faroe Islands, Andorra, etc., rather than them trying to scrabble around to find like friendlies against, I don't know, Ghana or Tahiti or something like that, rather than them having to sort of go out of their way to try and find games that might be competitive for them, if they just put the teams that are in a similar ranking position to them in the same groups, it means that they're not just going to go away somewhere and get humped 8-0 in a game. The games are going to be more competitive because you've got teams that are ranked in a similar fashion based on the talent level of their players or the perceived level of their players. The other bonus that comes with it is that it offers like a secondary route into the major tournaments. So when Scotland qualified for Euro 2020, they only did that because they did it off the back of the fact that they'd won their Nations League group. So winning their Nations League group guaranteed them a playoff berth for the European Championships. So for the smaller teams, there's going to be Scottish people out there saying that I'm saying that Scotland's a small nation. No, wasn't the intention. But for the smaller nations like North Macedonia, for example, that's the same way that they got into the European Championships, that by winning their subsection of the tournament as a whole, there is actually like a carrot at the end of it in the fact that there's that. And the thing that will be a knock-on for England if they do get relegated out of the top group is that their ranking points will slip. So there might not be a top seed in the next set of qualifying for the next European Championships if it goes that far. So this is another thing I was explaining to a guy at work today. So the reason why Wales have now been able to qualify for so many tournaments in a row is because they had better players that came through, but they got to the point where instead of being in the same pot as teams like Andorra, San Marino, Liechtenstein, they were guaranteed to get a team like that in their qualification group, which meant they were more likely to be higher up in the group. So there is some merit to it. I think it's just one of those things that the more it gets played, the more people will start to sort of care about it and think it's actually a worthwhile thing.
Cool. That answers that.
I suppose the only other thing I had really from the game was that it sort of highlights just like, I know I never really thought you'd say that like a defensive midfielder was a key like sort of position from a holding it all together, but it goes to show how much England miss Declan Rice when he doesn't play.
Oh, thank God for that. I thought you were going to say Henderson.
I was like, Jordan Henderson?
It's fine.
Yes, because obviously the people who've tuned into the last 3 or 4 years worth of podcasts have definitely heard my undying love for England's generational midfield captain.
Like I said last night, the Yorkshire Pirlo, or as I renamed him, the Headingley Henderson, did a perfectly good Jordan Henderson impression yesterday, Calvin Phillips, of being just about like 2 yards behind the ball or the person carrying the ball at any one time. I mean, I've never seen it. I know he's spent most of the season out, but Christ Almighty!
Every single one of the challenges that Calvin Phillips put in last night was way worse than the second yellow card that John Stones got, and yet nothing. Like, that second yellow was an absolute disgrace.
It was a joke, and the fact that because it was a yellow card, VAR couldn't intervene is another sort of shocking indictment of how bad it is as a system. But yeah, that's just his game, though, isn't it? He's always been a little bit rash in the challenge, a little bit nasty with a late foot here and there and stuff like that. That's just part and parcel of his game. But I said it when he got called up. I don't know why he was in the squad when he should have basically been using the break to focus on his fitness. He should have been using that to get back match fit. And I know you can say, oh yeah, but he played the games to get match fit. No. He just needed to he's probably still a little bit injured, let's be honest. He's probably not 100% fit, so why didn't they just let him have the break, let him relax, let him actually rehab fully, and then go again for the start of next season? But just a strange one for me. I think Conor Gallagher was in based on his work rate, because there's been games this season where he's covered like 12 miles or something in a game, or there might have been 12 kilometres, but either way, like the shift that he puts in is unbelievable at times for Crystal Palace. So
there's a huge difference between running a long way and being any good at it. Like I know that I've already slated him already, but man, he was terrible last night. Like,
I don't think you can say that any of the players came out with any sort of like credit or positive impact at the end of the game. Even Sterling, when he came on, like, fair enough, he ran about a bit, but the amount of times he overran the ball or just ran over the ball was ridiculous.
When Sterling came on, obviously it was too far gone anyway. You could just see by his demeanour that he really just could not give any less of a fuck what he was doing last night. Like, if it came off, great. If it didn't, what's it matter? Like, he was just not interested in that by the time he came on.
I think someone had said something about, these players, they kind of, you can say that the end of the season's coming, the end of the season's over, and the hungry players have just finished. Well, was it Styles who played for Barnsley? He probably hasn't played in a month. Yeah, he has not played in a month. Even if he played in the last game of the season, he's not played for a month, so he's kind of had a rest. A lot of the England players, literally, the season finished and they've gone straight to play. And I don't know. It seems unnecessary to play 4 games in 10 days after you've just played a season where it's all been condensed down. Like, we're still kind of, and then we're going to go straight into another season.
Before we do wrap on the England stuff, though, I would just like to give a special mention to fairly new pundit Ashley Cole, who rolled out the joke on behalf of all dads last night by saying that Hungary definitely looked more hungry for it.
No.
Oh dear. I've got a few. I've got a few stats based on the sheer severity of the loss that I've plucked from the Sky Sports app. Obviously, Stuart mentioned it was the worst home defeat for England since 1928 when they lost 5-1 to Scotland. But continuing on the trend, Hungary became the first team to score 4 goals in an away match against England since. That's correct. Hungary, when they won 6-3 at Wembley in November 1953. This was England's first defeat by 4 or more goals since May 1964, when they lost 5-1 to Brazil in a friendly. It's only the second time England have lost by 4 or more goals without scoring, along with a 5-0 defeat to Yugoslavia in May 1958, and the first time ever on home soil. England have gone 4 consecutive matches without a win for the first time since a run of 5 in 2014. And finally, England have scored just 1 goal over a period of 4 games for the first time since a run between October 2006 and March 2007. And I'm pretty sure that means the last 2 sequences where they've scored 1 goal in a period of 4 games, the last 2 times that's happened, it's both been with ex-Middlesbrough managers.
And you can also add to that list, seeing as they wheeled it out on TV quite a lot during the game, was that it must be getting on for 7 hours since they've scored from open play.
Yeah, not great.
So, putting out the best England team we can, I see. So, to wrap up the game, I alluded to this earlier. Every single person on the podcast, even a 1-0 from this guy, had England down to win quite heavily. What makes it that little bit, I don't know how you want to slice it, Matthew Moore was the only person to predict a Hungary goal scorer and didn't get one of the 3 that actually scored goals, which means we're all having bagels for tea. No points out of this game, which means it's a draw for the week total. So Matt, Stu, pick your weapons and I'll see you in the arena for the fight to the death to win the week. Now then, as far as predicting football, that's it. Look.
I mean, unless we want to predict what score my game next Monday will finish.
I've got this quite serious Year 5 game going on at school at the moment. Got to come to do that one.
Unfortunately, for the I'm pretty sure by legal reasons we're probably not allowed to pick goal scorers there.
Nah.
No, I don't want any.
We'll go with the Scottish formula. We'll just go with trialist A, trialist B, etc., etc. You're gonna have a hell of a lot of paperwork to fill out those. So.
I was going to say I really don't need any DPA requests coming through. I'm good on that front because I hear that they're a nightmare to complete. So, nothing to predict. Reviews are done. Presumably that brings us on to news.
Well, seeing as we've just been talking about youngsters scoring, just a little mention for podcast favourite Keane Lewis Potter, who scored for the England under-21s 2 minutes after being brought on. I mean, that England side did win 5-0, so, you know, they obviously knew what the hell they were doing. But yeah, so quite happy to see him playing, but also as well him managing to notch a goal as well.
On the slightly kind of negative side of that, old Jed, Middlesbrough's own Jed, scored a first minute goal.
I knew it. I knew as soon as the season was done, you'd want nothing to do with him anymore.
But being as he's off to Spurs because the lure of Champions League football is too much.
Listen, it's not that. It's nothing to do with the Champions League football. He just really wants to play in a toilet bowl.
He's never been able to get front row seats for the Champions League before, and now we'll be able to watch it from the bench, so it's fine.
Hey!
But also, Huddersfield fans, have a look at yourselves, because apparently him and James Garner got booed every time they touched the ball when they were on the other night. I mean,
apparently it happened as soon as the teams were read out.
For God's sake.
So yeah, I can see a situation where if they ever come up against Huddersfield again, they'll take great joy in putting them to the sword, let's put it that way.
But it's not going to be next season, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, news-wise, I've got very little. Obviously, we're recording this podcast again, up to date in somewhat, but the fixtures are released tomorrow for the Premier League teams, so Nottingham Forest will know who their first game in the top flight in 23 years will be against. There's rumours doing the rounds that it was leaked earlier in the week. So what is it?
Leeds.
It's
gonna have to.
So the leak earlier in the week was that it was going to be Crystal Palace at home. So we'll see what happens. But for the interest of just like something to sort of link back to, let's have some guesses what we think they might get. I'll go
You'd like to think that the newly promoted team gets a big name. When it happened to Hull, we had Chelsea away.
Yeah, but there was a season where they had Leicester at home.
And Fulham at home was also. Fulham at home has also been one.
I wonder whether they try and keep it and you get the two kind of sob stories of the Premier League / kind of thing. So whether it's like a Forest Leeds situation, whether you get that kind of thing, because they'll enjoy that. Oh, you know, here's Forest, they've had 23 years, but don't forget, Leeds, they really fucked themselves for a bit, so they kind of spent some time down in League One.
Sorry, is it an option to forget Leeds? Is that on the can we? Is that just?
Sky Sports will never let that happen. Good God, if we've not got Liverpool to talk about, or the Spuds, or someone like that, we're definitely going to talk about Leeds at some point.
I'd like to throw forward the suggestion that there's going to be the whole sort of they haven't had a top flight fixture in 23 years. Who they're going to get? And it'll be Bournemouth.
Oh, it probably will be. It's probably If not, it'll be
Fulham.
No, it'll be like kind of the Dregs, Brighton, or something like that.
Someone that they've played within the last couple of years or something like that. Like
or just
Brentford.
No one's going to give a monkeys about. No one's going to give a toss about Forest going to Brighton and their 17,000 seater brand new stadium. Like, oh, come on, folks. Like, no one's going to be. It's either that or it'll be something splashy where Forest get absolutely stuffed, like Liverpool or something like that.
Purely for the link to the podcast, I'm going to throw Newcastle in there.
Well,
that'll be devastating because we probably won't be able to get tickets for that game.
Yeah.
If it's Newcastle away, we'll be like, we're going to go to that game. No, we're not, because there's not a cat in the house chance of us getting a ticket.
I remember a few years back in my day, of being a little bit more around football, shall we say, and there being a leak and it was subsequently changed, so it wouldn't surprise, because all the clubs will have the fixtures obviously now, but it's all unbongoed until.
They do practice runs, don't they? And they probably send out false stuff and.
The clubs will have them, and they say they're not allowed. They're not allowed to make anything of it until I think it's 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. So the second 9 a.m. hits, it'll go live on every club's website, all over Sky Sports News, and be able to find out, say, who the first game is, who the last game is, and who the Boxing Day game is. Are usually the three that folks look for. Yep. But it'll also highlight the international Christmas World Cup break this time around, won't it? So that.
Speaking of the World Cup break, the last place was sorted out this week. It was between New Zealand and Costa Rica, and Costa Rica were the team who managed to make their way through. So they are the final team to take their place in Qatar, and FIFA has now. This is again taken from Sky Sports. FIFA has confirmed the first 2 rounds of matches will kick off at 1, 4, 7 and 10 p.m. local time, which means 10, 1, 4 and 7 p.m. UK time. So there's a distinct possibility that a lot of people will be unwell for the first couple of weeks of the tournament. Kick-off times of the final round of group games and knockout round matches will be at 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. local time, 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. UK time. Finally scheduled to kick off at 6 p.m. local time, 3 p.m. UK time. So plan your sick days accordingly.
Australia beat Peru as well, didn't they, to qualify?
Yeah, I think that was the week before, maybe.
I don't think we covered it though, did we?
Oh, did we not? Oh, fair enough. Yeah, so Australia and Costa Rica in the tournament.
We missed the biggest thing of kind of talking about terrible, kind of absolute shit shows. Of course, the ongoing saga of Derby is carried on, and US businessman Chris Kirchner and his delightful wife are no longer in the running to buy Derby. So joy all round for everybody, because they started running their mouths nice and loud as Forest went up. And, they've been running their mouths ever since they bought Derby, and now they haven't bought Derby, and soon, by the look of it, it's going to turn into a good old Mike Cashley's, sports emporium.
Surely be Mike Cashley's quick and easy fire sale, surely.
The best thing I read today was that a Derby fan was worried that he would not pay the creditors, and therefore, because he refused to, which would then plunge them into minus 15 at the start of the season. I'm like, oh my God, anything could get me really, really excited for the start of the season would be kind of, Forest in the Premiership. I mean, I don't care if it's like, it could be 15-0 for all I care, but if they're on minus 15 points, it'll just be a joyous occasion.
Well, it's all right though, because they'll just go the Leeds route, won't they? And they'll dedicate squad number minus 15 to the FA, and they'll have page number minus 15 in the programmes for that season and stuff like that. And then hopefully they'll get beaten by Doncaster in the playoff final. So
that just hammered home how stupid they were at the time, because the page numbers went 12, 13, 14, minus 15. I mean, I know there are people there with a lot of fingers, but even they can't count, can they, really? So.
And on that absolute bombshell, I've just checked the numbers, and the listeners in Derby have officially exited the building. That's it. It is it for what is probably quite a short space of time, but it gives you a chance to put your feet up, get rehabbed, and get back to the game in a few weeks. We will keep an eye on the football world and gather up all the stories, all the news, all the previews, all the tidbits, and everything in between, and we'll bring them back to you in a mere matter of weeks. All that's left is for me to thank these gentlemen for Season 4, Series 4, 40-something episodes of football delight. Join us for Season 5. That's right. Until then, thanks from me to these guys, thanks from these guys to you guys, and thanks all round. We shall catch you next time. Bye-bye. So there you go, what do you think of that? End of a season, but not end of an era, really, because we're going to be back very soon. A couple of weeks, a few weeks, maybe, something like that. Big thank you to everybody that's listened. Big thank you to the gentlemen that do the podcast. Paul, Stu, Matt. Big thank yous all round. Before you go, if you've got a spare minute, please do consider like, share, subscribe and comment. And if you do have any time extra, you could leave us a review. Tell us how much you love the podcast. And if you're coasting around the internet, you could drop in on our website, thecookiecast.com. There we've got social media links and an email button for you to get in touch with us. That is it for this one. That is it for this season. Until next time, I'm going to say bye, and I'll see you then.